Imagine you're a hunter living thousands of years ago. You have a spear, maybe a bow, maybe a sharp rock, and then someone walks onto the battlefield carrying a tube, a simple metal tube. They light it. A loud explosion shakes the air. Smoke fills the sky. And suddenly, a piece of metal flies faster than anyone has ever seen. No giant muscles. No years of training with a bow. Just fire. So here's the question. How did humans ever think of something so strange? Because no animal has ever invented a gun. No ancient tribe woke up one morning and accidentally fired a bullet. Somewhere in history, someone had to imagine the impossible. Someone looked at fire and wondered, what if I could throw a rock with an explosion? Think about that for a second. Where does an idea like that even come from? And here's the strange part. The answer doesn't actually begin with weapons. It begins with people trying to become immortal. Thousands of years before guns existed, people across the world were obsessed with mysterious powders. Not because they wanted to fight, because they wanted to live forever. In ancient China, alchemists spent centuries mixing strange ingredients together. Sulfur, charcoal, saltpeter. They weren't building weapons. They were searching for an elixir of life. Basically, the world's first chemistry experiment had nothing to do with war. It was closer to ancient cooking mixed with wishful thinking. Except the recipes could explode. Here's where things get weird. One day, someone mixed those ingredients in just the wrong, or maybe just the right, amount. Instead of eternal life, boom. Fire, smoke, heat, lots of heat. Ancient texts even warned people not to repeat the experiment because it burned their hands, faces, and entire houses. Imagine trying to invent immortality and accidentally inventing explosives. That's a pretty bad day in the laboratory. Or maybe the most important accident in history. But discovering gunpowder wasn't enough. People had fireworks for centuries before they had real guns. So why didn't they immediately think, let's launch metal with this? Because that idea is much stranger than it sounds. Think about early humans. For hundreds of thousands of years, every weapon followed the same rule. Your muscles created the power. A spear, an axe, a club, even bows used energy from your own body. The weapon only stored your strength. Nothing made power by itself. Then gunpowder appeared. For the first time ever, energy came from chemistry instead of muscles. That changed everything. But humans didn't realize it immediately. In fact, the earliest uses of gunpowder weren't guns at all. People filled bamboo tubes with powder. Sometimes they exploded. Sometimes they scared enemies. Sometimes they simply made loud noises. Basically, history's first weapons were giant firecrackers. Imagine charging into battle, only to be attacked by fireworks. Sounds ridiculous. Unless you're the one standing closest to the explosion. Then it's suddenly much less funny. Eventually, someone noticed something curious. Whenever the explosion happened inside a closed tube, objects shot out. Not gently. Violently. And that's where one tiny observation changed history forever. Instead of asking, how can we make a bigger explosion? Someone asked, what happens if we put something in front of it? That question may have changed civilization. Here's why. Human intelligence isn't just about inventing new things. It's about connecting ideas that don't seem related. Psychologists call this analogical thinking. You see one thing. You imagine another. A child sees a stick. They pretend it's a sword. An inventor sees an explosion. They imagine it pushing a rock. Same brain. Different scale. This ability separates humans from almost every other animal. We don't just solve problems. We imagine problems that don't even exist yet. And then we invent answers. That's weird. Really weird. Archaeologists believe the earliest true guns appeared in China around the 1200s. They were called hand cannons. And honestly, they looked almost nothing like modern guns. No trigger, no magazine, no sights. just a metal tube attached to a stick. Imagine carrying a tiny cannon around like a flashlight. Not exactly comfortable. Or safe. Sometimes these weapons exploded. Sometimes they misfired. Sometimes they hurt the person holding them. Quality control wasn't exactly impressive, but they worked. And once people realized explosions could throw metal farther and harder than any bow, there was no going back. Here's something surprising. Early guns were actually worse than bows in many ways. They were slow, heavy, inaccurate. Archers could fire several arrows while a gunner loaded one shot. So why did guns win? Because they required much less training. An expert archer might spend 20 years mastering a bow. A gun? You could learn the basics in weeks. Kings noticed that. Armies noticed that. Empires definitely noticed that. Suddenly, warfare wasn't about finding the strongest people. It was about producing the most gunpowder. Technology started replacing muscle. Sound familiar? Humans have repeated that pattern ever since. Machines replaced muscles. Computers replaced memory. Artificial intelligence is starting to replace certain kinds of thinking. It all follows the same story. We keep moving work from ourselves into our inventions. But here's another mystery. Why are humans so obsessed with making better weapons? Why didn't we stop with spears? Anthropologists think competition played a huge role. Imagine two neighboring villages. One invents a stronger weapon. The other village now has two choices: copy it or disappear. Nobody wanted to be second. So inventions spread incredibly fast. Not because everyone loved war, because nobody wanted to lose one. It's an uncomfortable truth. Some of humanity's greatest technological leaps came from fear. Fear is an incredible inventor. Not always a good one, but an effective one. Here's where things become even stranger. The invention of guns didn't just change battles. It changed society itself. Castles became vulnerable. Knights became less important. Armor became heavier. Until eventually it became useless. Entire political systems collapsed because one invention made old defenses obsolete. Think about that. One chemical reaction completely rewrote history. And yet, the chemistry itself never changed. Sulfur, charcoal, saltpeter. That's it. 3 simple ingredients. The magic wasn't in the materials. It was in the idea. That's probably the most human part of this story. Humans rarely invent something from nothing. We combine things that already exist. Fire already existed. Metal already existed. Tubes already existed. Explosions already existed. The genius wasn't creating them. It was putting them together in a completely new way. Creativity is often just unexpected combinations. That's true for music, for science, for art, for inventions, even for jokes. Sometimes the funniest joke is simply two unrelated ideas crashing into each other. Kind of like gunpowder, only much safer, hopefully. So, did humans invent guns? Or did curiosity invent them? Because every step began with a question. What happens if? What if we try? What if this works? Most experiments failed. Some exploded. Some burned laboratories down. But every failure taught something. Until one day, a metal tube changed the world. And maybe that's the real lesson. The most powerful invention wasn't the gun. It was the human mind that kept asking impossible questions. Questions no other species seems interested in asking. Questions that turned fire into power, chemistry into technology, and accidents into civilization. Because history isn't really the story of weapons. It's the story of curiosity. A curious monkey learned to control fire. A curious alchemist accidentally made gunpowder. A curious inventor realized explosions could move metal. Every step looked ridiculous before it looked obvious. Which makes you wonder, what impossible idea are we accidentally inventing today? The people living 1,000 years from now might look back at us the same way we look at those first-hand cannons. Primitive, messy, dangerous, but undeniably brilliant. And it all started with someone asking one very strange question.